Be'ez Hashem Yisborach, we begin Perek Chamisha, the 5th chapter in the Rambam's Hilchos Shechitah and laws of slaughtering in the Sefer Kedusha, which up until now we're speaking about the requirement of doing an appropriate Shechitah. And here the Rambam discusses regarding what would be qualified as a treifa, which, and the Rambam is going to define what exactly that means, and also begin discussing the first of the many different types of treifa, that of Jerusa. So in the halacha, the Rambam gives an introduction for the laws of treifa. Says the Rambam, we already explained the laws of forbidden food items in the 4th chapter. When the Torah says that a treifa animal is forbidden, it means to say what we call a mortal defect. It's an animal that's leaning towards death. And treifa, so then why does it say the wording treifa, which that literal definition seems to be regarding if it was mauled and preyed upon by a wild animal? That's because the Torah only talks about in what's commonly experienced. Because that's what normally happens. A lion preys or a similar type of a creature, ushvara, and it breaks the animal, didn't die yet, but it has a moral defect. It's a ticking time bomb. That's a common case of what would happen, but it's any type of situation which the animal has a moral defect, that would be considered as a treifa animal, thus not kosher, and the shechita wouldn't be effective. Now, but says Ram Halacha Beis, v'yeshem chalom acherim. Now, there are other types of illnesses. In Yerolov, what would happen to an animal, techashav treifa, would also be considered, quote unquote, a treifa. V'hem halacha Moshe b'Sinai. And these are all halachas that are traditions received from Moshe Rabbeinu from Har Sinai, which the Rambam at the end of Perek Gud actually quotes 70 types of treifas, but they're all halacha Moshe b'Sinai, and they're all included in the 8 types of treifas that the Rambam's explaining right now. He says, there were 8 types of treifas that were said to Moshe from Har Sinai, and they are Jerusa, which is the one that I'm going to speak about in this parak, where that's literally the case of treifa, where it was pounced on. Nukuva, if it has a hole. Chasera, if it's missing one of the limbs from birth. Netula, if one of the limbs were taken by human intervention, but it wasn't born like that. Psuka, if it's cut. Karua, if it's torn. Nefula, if it fell. Ushvura, and if it's broken, which there's a mnemonic to recall. These are called Dan, Chanak, Nefesh, which that reminds us of these 8 different tarfas. Now it says Ram Halacha Gimel. Although they're all, as we said, halachas, laws that were received from Moshe from Sinai, but since the only one that's explicit in the Torah is the one of that it was pounced on by a wild animal, like we said in the previous halacha. So but they were more stringent regarding that treifa, the drusa, than all the rest. And v'chosafik sheistabik b'drusa, any doubt that we have regarding if it was darus, if it was preyed upon, us is forbidden. Yet ushar shiva mini treifas, the other 7 types of treifas, yes, but misvik mitam, there are a situation of doubt that are permitted, like we will explain. But first, in halacha dal, Rambam explains the first of the 8 treifas, hadrusa, the one that was preyed on. Who that is? Sheyitrif hari b'kayetzibai habehema, that if, let's say, a lion or similar types of creatures, if they prey upon an animal, the yidrus and it claws into the animal with its paw, or yidrus hanetz v'hanesho, let's say a hawk or an eagle goes and pounces on the kayezbem or some type of a creature aloif on a bird, that will make that victim into a drusa. Now, now, let's say a large domestic or wild animal will not be considered as a darus, only if it's such a big creature that's a creature that's preying on it like a lion. Only that would go ahead and make it. Now, daka, now with small livestock, anything from the wolf and bigger would be considered enough to make it into a drusa. Now these kid goats and the lambs, which are the small ones of the small livestock, then even a cat, the shul, and the fox, and the mia, and the martin, or things like that, yeshlam drisa would make it into a drisa, and b'choshikim ba'ifris. And for sure, regarding fowl, which are very vulnerable and susceptible, that for sure that these creatures would make them into a drusa. Now halacha hey, vanates, interestingly, a hawk, yeshle drisa could make drisa, even in a bird that's bigger than it. Because avoshara ifras adoris, in contrast, all the other birds of prey, yeshlem drisa ba'if shekamaysim, they can only make an equivalent bird like it is, or lower, into a victim of drisa. But they cannot make a bird that's bigger than them into a doris by clawing into them. Now, a weasel could create drisa by birds, by fowl. Now, the kelev ain't la drisa kolikar. A dog doesn't have the halacha even if it claws into the creature, into the victim, does not have halacha making it into a daras. And the reason for that is we're going to shortly explain, that the whole halacha of drisa is an application of a certain poison that they have in their claws, which dogs don't have that in their paws. So therefore it doesn't create drisa, not in the birds, not in domestic or wild animals. Now, drisa, like we said, the hawk could create drisa in the kid goats and in the lambs. But this is only if its claws make a hole into the intestines, into the cavities of the inside of the animal. Halacha Zayin, says the Rambam, ain't drisa ela b'yad hatoyev. Drisa is only in the foreleg of the animal that's preying. But if it's in the hind legs, they were not concerned with that. And the reason for that is because the poison of the preying creature is only in its foreleg, not in its hind leg. Moreover, the drisa is only with its claws. But if it preyed with its teeth, we're not concerned with that. Unless it made a hole all the way into the inside of the animal, then we're concerned not necessarily for that of drisa, but simply because of nekuva, of having a hole. So then you have to check if it made a hole in one of the limbs, then it's becoming a trefa simply because of the hole. Moreover, the halach of drisa is only with the intent of the preying animal. Let's say the preying animal fell, and its claws just happen to get stuck in the victim. Into drisa, that's not considered as drisa, because again, it only has to go ahead and inject its venom, and that's only intentional. And vein drisa melachayim. So to drisa only when the animal's alive, because avalim daras. But let's say an animal preyed on the victim, the nerig and the preying animal died, but dying yod bedrusa, and its hand, its paw, its claw is still in the victim. And its claws were only removed from the victim only after the preying creature was already dead, then we don't have to be concerned with that. And the reason for that is because the drisa only happens at the end. What happens is that the venom that's in the claw is injected by the preying creature when it removes its claws, then it injects the venom. And since it only was pulled out after it was dead, so therefore there's no concern of drisa in that case. Allah says the Rambam, now the Ketza didn't have drisa. So how do we evaluate this halach of drisa? So wherever we say that we're concerned for the drusa, what we say is Shechitah as a nitrip. So we slaughter the victim, and we inspect the whole inside of the inner cavity of the animal, from the foot, or from the bottom of the foot all the way up till the head. Now it doesn't include the actual bottom of the foot itself, because there actually, even if it has the signs that we're going to describe right now where the flesh is red, it's going to be kosher, because even if the whole bottom of the foot was taken off, it would be kosher. But from there all the way to the top, you check. Now, even if it's kula shleimim becoming the treifas, if you find the whole thing intact from inside, from all types of treifas, and and neither do you find a sign of it being clawed, then it's going to be permitted. But from if you find a sign that it was mold, that it was a victim of drisa, how is a treifa? Then we can say it as a treifa. Assuming that is going to be biblically forbidden. As Rambam explains, halacha tes izehu reish madrisa. What's the sign of it that it was victimized by drisa? If the flesh opposite the area of where the intestines are, so the flesh right on top of it, if that got red, that is a sign. Why is it getting red? Because it was pounced on by an animal of prey, and then again it's going to be forbidden because of this suffix of drusa. Now let's say the flesh is actually decaying opposite the area of where the intestines are. That's like the type of flesh that a doctor would scrape away from a wound so that it could heal, but that flesh is gone. So then we view that flesh as if it's not there, and therefore it's going to be like a treifa. Now, Allah here, the Rambam continues, Vimdoras basimonim. Let's say the animal of prey clawed in where the signs, the two pipes that are supposed to be slaughtered by the neck. So there, mishiyadimu, if the simonim themselves, the windpipe and the food pipe, got red, and it's specifically them, in contrast, if it was only the flesh opposite the simonim that got red, it actually would be kosher, because the simonim, the pipes, are actually very hard. And the venom that was placed in the flesh opposite them, that's why it's red, would not have an effect. and it's only when the signs themselves, the pipes themselves got red, then it affected it. So if they got red themselves, then treifa is going to be treifa. And like we're explaining, udrisasim b'mashu, because the halach of drisa is even a minute amount. So even though by the windpipe, which only becomes a treifa if the most of it was cut, by drusa, it's going to become a treifa even by a minute amount, because again, the venom goes and bubbles and burns and would create a treifa even with a minute amount. And kimet shehedim hem kol shumach drisa, since it got a little bit red because of the drisa, so treifa is going to be a treifa. So that's regarding the Reish Madrisa. Now, Halachit after Ram explains what we had said is the stringency uniquely to Drusa regarding Suffolk Drusa. Says the Ram, Sveik Drusa, if we have a doubt, we're not sure if it was victimized, Asur can be forbidden, actually, but again, until it's checked, could Drusa Bados, like a definitive Drusa, like we explained, that when you know that there's signs of Drusa, which you know is Doris, you have to check to see did it negatively affect it or not. That same thing applies to Suffolk Drusa, that's going to be automatically forbidden until you check. Kate said, how so? What's a Suffolk Drusa? So Arisha Nechnas Bein Shalom, let's say have a line that went amongst the oxen. And you find a claw of the line in the back of one of those oxen. It would concern that maybe the line pounced on it, and that is a Suffolk Drusa. And we don't say, oh, what do you mean? Maybe the line clawed on the wall, its claw got stuck in the wall, and maybe the ox was scratching its back on the wall or got scraped on the wall, and the claw just happened to get stuck in the back, but it wasn't actually clawed, because again, it's not the claw per se, it's the venom that comes through the claw. So we don't say, we say that the Suffolk juice is going to be asur. V'chein shul in the miyah. Same thing is regarding a fox or a marten, which went amongst the fowl. And the perpetrator, the fox, is silent, and they're crowing away. We're concerned that maybe he prayed, and that's why they're making noise. Now, let's say he's roaring or whatever the sound of the creature of prey is, and they're crowing. Then we could say that's because they're afraid, and from his growling that they're crowing, and therefore that their crowing is not necessarily a sign that he did anything. So too, let's say he cut off the head of one of them, so that we know his anger was calmed down, and therefore we don't have to suspect anything. So too, if he and they are quiet, we're not concerned, because if it would have harmed, they would be crowing. So then we wouldn't have to be suspect that there's anything that happened, there was no foul play. Yud Bey says the Rambam, Safek shenichnis lekan toyrif oy loy nichnis. Let's say we're not sure, did a perpetrator, the animal of prey, enter or did it not enter? Or let's say we saw that he did enter, but we don't know whether one of the creatures that would be toyrif or not. So in that case, there also wouldn't have to be concerned, because here you have a double suffix. First of all, was there a toyrif? And even if we say that there was, that, what do you mean, maybe you get injured from the reeds or some other way, so even though it's a biblical doubt, we'll go svek sveka lekula. And so too a bird, so let's say it went amongst the wood or amongst the reeds and it came out, and its head is dripping blood or it's by its neck, they wouldn't have to suspect that maybe it was a treifa, rather we say, maybe got harmed from the wood. And yeah, we would have to check by the Siman to see if it got a hole in its veshet because of the harm from the wood. But again, in these situations, we wouldn't have to suspect, again, when we say when they're silent by the birds, or here in these cases where it's a svek sveka, that you don't know if there was, and even if it was, did it enter, and so too by the case of the bird. So in those situations, we don't have to suspect if it was Doris, if it became a treif.